What lesson do we take from what happened in Puerto Rico? How do we apply the lessons we took from Puerto Rico?
Well, I think Puerto Rico was incredibly successful. Puerto Rico was actually our toughest one of all because it's an island, so you can't truck things onto it. Everything's by boat. We moved a hospital into Puerto Rico, a tremendous military hospital in the form of a ship. You know that. And I actually think, and the governor's been very nice, and if you ask the governor, he'll tell you what a great job. I think probably the hardest one we had by far was Puerto Rico because of the island nature. And I actually think it was one of the best jobs that's ever been done with respect to what this is all about. Puerto Rico got hit not with one hurricane, but with two. And the problem with Puerto Rico is their electric grid and their electric generating plant was dead before the storms ever hit. It was in very bad shape. It was in bankruptcy. Had no money. It was largely closed. And when the storm hit, they had no electricity essentially before the storm. And when the storm hit, that took it out entirely. The job that FEMA and law enforcement and everybody did, working along with the governor in Puerto Rico, I think was tremendous. I think that Puerto Rico was an incredible unsung success. Texas, we have been given A-pluses for. Florida, we've been given A-pluses for. I think in a certain way, the best job we did was Puerto Rico, but nobody would understand that. I mean, it's harder to understand. It was a very hard thing to do because of the fact they had no electric. Before the storms hit, it was dead, as you probably know. So we've gotten a lot of receptivity, a lot of thanks for the job we've done in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is very important. And by the way, speaking of Puerto Rico, they're going to be affected pretty soon by something else that's on its way. Is that right?
Potentially, Hurricane Isaac right now is tracking south of the island, but we have several thousand people inside Puerto Rico right now working on long-term recovery that have shifted to the response mode to monitor as Isaac passes to the south.
We do not want to see Hurricane Isaac hit Puerto Rico. That's all we need. But we have a big hurricane out there, and it's sort of skirting along Puerto Rico and the edge of Puerto Rico. That would not be good.
Mr. President, how much money do you think you'll need for recovery efforts in this next hurricane, and do you have that?
Well, we have it currently. We're going to, obviously, these are all unanticipated, so we'll go to Congress. Congress will be very generous because we have no choice. This is the United States, and it's whether it's Texas or Florida, or frankly, if it's Virginia, because Virginia looks like it's very much in the path. Maryland, by the way, could be affected, very seriously affected, just to add. It's a little bit outside of the path. And then, of course, South Carolina and North Carolina. I think that any amounts of money, whatever it takes, we're going to do. But we're already set up. We have tremendous trucking systems. We have food systems. We have a lot of contractors waiting, but for the most part, it's been handled by FEMA, and also we've coordinated locally. We have food for days. We have emergency equipment and generators for many days. We should be in great shape. Now, I've also heard it could be 21 and 22 inches. If you can imagine what that is, 22 inches of rain. It is not something that we've had. Certainly, we've never had this on the East Coast. So, but I think we're very well prepared, very well set up, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think this storm right here is very similar to Hurricane Hugo, and it's almost like a combination of Hurricane Hugo in '89 and Hurricane Floyd in 1999. But look, successful disaster response and recovery is one that's locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. So what FEMA is doing is pre-positioning the federal government's assets to support each one of those governors that are about to be impacted with achieving their response and recovery goals. And that's the way emergency management and disaster response works best. I also think I'd like to point out that what we learned last year is that we have got to build a true culture of preparedness within our citizens here in America. This is a partnership, and it takes anything from neighbor helping neighbor all the way to the federal government when it comes to correctly responding and recovering.
Minister, can we ask you about preparation for power outages? What's being done right now?
Sure, great. That's a great question. So FEMA doesn't own the power grids in any one of these states. A lot of them are owned by the private industry. So what we have are business emergency operations center calls. We're concentrating with the private vendors to make sure that they have strong mutual aid programs in place, and we set up incident support bases to help stage power crews coming in from other states. And largely, it's FEMA's job to get out of the way to make sure that the private power companies can get into these areas to set up their grid. We don't own it. We don't own it.
But unlike Puerto Rico, you have very strong power companies. They're very powerful, very well managed in the sense that they have tremendous overcapacity. They are going to do a great job. They also have made contracts with other power companies that won't be affected, and they're going to be coming in. Just to answer your question, they'll be coming in to the various states that will be affected. They're going to be coming in very strongly, and they're already lining up. They'll be here probably for the most part tomorrow or shortly before the storm hits. So they're going to be in great shape. These are really states that have very, very strong power authorities.
What's your message, Mr. President, to people who might not have evacuated yet?
Well, that's very risky. I mean, again, we've never seen anything quite like this on the East Coast, at least. And if it turns out to be as bad, we go out there. You have people that actually go fly through these storms. These are very brave people, but they fly through. And from what I'm hearing, the sites that they're seeing have not been seen on the East Coast before. So I would say everybody should get out. I mean, you have to listen to your local authorities, and whether you're upland or downland, but depending on where you are, you have to listen and you have to get out. If they want you to get out, because it's going to be impossible to have people get in there, whether it's law enforcement or FEMA or anybody else, once this thing hits, it's going to be really, really bad along the coast.
One of the president's points there when he was asked about Puerto Rico, it is wonderful that we are hearing from FEMA and how this administration is preparing. I couldn't help but notice the president's comments on Puerto Rico were referring to the response as incredibly successful and an unsung success and one of the best ever. That is successful despite the fact that this new study found that nearly 3,000 people died. Caitlin Collins, I want to come to you on this over at the White House. 3,000 people died, according to this most recent George Washington University study, and the administration's response is still under fire. Where is this incredibly successful even coming from?
That's the question a lot of people are going to have after hearing the president's comments there. First, some very leadership presidential comments, hearing from the president, hearing from the FEMA administration ahead of the Hurricane Florence and what people need to do to prepare on the coast. But then the president looking back at Puerto Rico, saying that it was an unsung success, that it was very successful, talking about the praise they received after that hurricane hit for the administration's response, which frankly, Brooke, just isn't the case here. It actually has been widely criticized because, of course, at first the death toll was in the dozens, and then it was raised to roughly 3,000 people who died there in Puerto Rico. Now, of course, that's not that shocking that the president made those comments, because just last week he was praising the way his administration responded to Puerto Rico. And of course, we know that in the past he said he believed that they had responded, that he would grade that response as a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, saying that they did a good job. That is simply not what a lot of people and a lot of experts who look at this situation would say with the way Puerto Rico was handled. Not only 3,000 people dying, but several people, or hundreds of people on that, going without power for so long. So, of course, certainly that's going to raise a lot of questions there, the president in the Oval Office. And something else you saw there, Brooke, was though in the past few days, aides have tried to redirect the president's focus on Hurricane Florence and the administration's response as they prepare for this. Something the president said there, that they are sparing no expense for this and warning Americans that this is going to be a very big storm that is headed toward the East Coast.